Well, let's just move to this story. A woman who's been dubbed the Ketamine Queen has pleaded guilty to supplying that drug that killed Friends star Matthew Perry. Jasveen Sangha, a US-UK dual citizen, admitted 5 charges in federal court, including distribution of ketamine resulting in death. She now faces up to 65 years in prison for her role in the actor's death. Let's speak now. For more on this story, Scarlett Howes, US correspondent at The Sun. Scarlett, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Hello.
This is not clearly a little small-time dealer that once in a while knew a bloke who knew a bloke and you sent him a text and he biked around a bit of Class A's for you. This was somebody that was clearly very significant in this world.
Yes, I mean, she was extremely. She grew up very wealthy, as you said. She's a US dual national, British background. She grew up in Calabasas, as we know. That's an incredibly wealthy part of Los Angeles. And she marketed herself publicly on social media as this kind of jet-setting, luxurious, glamorous woman who would hang out with celebrities like Charlie Sheen and so forth. And privately, she also marketed herself as that, but with another side of her personality, which was a drug dealer to high-end clients, to the stars, as kind of what she put out there. Now, she... it's quite. I think everybody thought that she would have her day in court because she took quite a while to enter into a plea deal. So she was in custody since last August. She's been in custody since last August, and all signs are pointing to her to prove her innocence in court. But last month she signed a plea deal, and yesterday she admitted 5 counts of federal charges, including the being responsible for the dose that ultimately killed Matthew Perry.
Wow. I mean, this is serious stuff. What is it? I mean, the plea deal thing. So the plea deal that she only gets 65 years in jail. I mean,
no. So it's quite confusing. So the maximum amount that she could get for these charges is 65 years. However, that's quite misleading because she's not going to, experts here say she's not going to get that. She's going to get probably about 10 to 15 years in jail because she wouldn't have accepted a plea deal if she wasn't going to reduce her sentence.
Well, right, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yes.
It's still a significant, just a significant amount of time, but it's a huge fall from a lifestyle for somebody, as you rightly say, had dined out unimpeded, rubbing shoulders with the good and the great, the best restaurants, I'm sure, fast cars and pool parties and goodness knows what. This is a big old fall for somebody like her.
Oh yeah, completely. And I mean, I don't think. I mean, what's really interesting as well is that prosecutors say in court, and court documents say that they allege that she actually knew that her ketamine was dangerous because in 2019 a man actually died who they say was supplied ketamine by her. So she kind of she knew what she was doing. And I think that she thought that there were going to be no consequences because she was doing it for so many years. And when police raided her home, they found, a vast amounts of ketamine and other types of drugs. They actually called it a drug emporium.
Wow.
So it's on a massive scale. It's not just like a dealer that's down the road. This is a.
I was going to say, I mean, is that the biggest offence? Is the big offence that she just had a lot of, to coin the phrase, a lot of gear in her house, and therefore was a big time drug dealer? Or is the fact that it resulted in the sad death of Matthew Perry is awful? Some would say, well, that's terrible, but that's not her fault. It's, the fault of people who take drugs, although you've just suggested there that perhaps she knew that there was something wrong with the kind of quality of what she was selling. So would she be imprisoned as a drug dealer? Would she be imprisoned as somebody who was ultimately responsible for someone's death?
Well, I think that it's ultimately someone who responsible for someone's death. But, these charges, so it's maintaining a drug-involved premises, 3 counts of distribution of ketamine, which is a drug dealer distribution, and 1 count of distribution of ketamine resulting in death. Now, I think that's what's so sad here is that, yes, people can say, he had addiction issues and, ultimately, he was the one who chose to take that drug. But, this was a very vulnerable man, and there were a lot of people involved in this who were making a lot of money out of him and his addiction. And, one of the doctors, so in court documents it came up that one of the doctors that's being charged, who's pleaded guilty to being involved in connection with Matthew Perry's ketamine case, is that he actually allegedly sent a text message saying, "How much money can we make out of this moron?"
Wow.
So I think that says it all, really.
Yeah, and that does kind of, I suppose, I don't know whether that has a legal impact, but it's certainly, you know, it's an awful twist and a perception of what was happening and that, you know, who this person, this Jasveen really was. It doesn't paint her in a particularly good light. Not that it's very easy to paint somebody in a good light who has a garage stashed with ketamine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just it's a very it's a complex situation, but I think that ultimately we can say that, you know, finally now the family have got Matthew Perry's family have got a little bit of closure, because at least the people involved have all pleaded guilty, and they will be sentenced. Well, she will be sentenced on December the 10th.
So it's not just her, of course. There are others involved in this too.
Yes, there's 4 others. There's 2 doctors who also illegally supplied him with ketamine, and there's his assistant, who was the one, administering the drug, injecting him with the drug. I think on the day of his death, he was injected with the drug, and her accomplice as well, who was a drug dealer. So between those 3, they were the ones who were kind of providing him with the ketamine.
Yeah. We will watch with interest. I'm sure we're going to talk again on this as well, Scarlett. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Scarlett House is the US correspondent for The Sun. Thank you to Scarlett. It's a grim story, and I have, you know, I know there's a line of a kind of, sorry, no pun. There's a line of thought or a kind of type of an opinion out there that, you know, if you take drugs, that's your own fault. And I kind of get that, but it does sort of rather ignore any other circumstances that might have led you to become a drunk or into drugs, recreational, prescription, or otherwise. So I do, and I think Perry was an incredibly gifted actor. So to kind of find himself in, I just sense someone like him. You're a reasonable looking bloke. You are never ever going to, I mean, how old was he when Friends was at is peak? How old would Matthew Perry have been? Yeah, it'd have been like late 20s, early 30s. So there you are, let's say a 30-year-old bloke. You are a multi-millionaire, and you've been involved and are involved with the biggest sitcom probably that has been seen globally for years, not since Different Strokes. I jest. So you've got all of that going on. And you must, as you go through your career, you think you're never going to... I always saw George Michael a bit like this. So you're never going to top. You can't... There's nothing out there that is going to... There's no greater satisfaction to come, if that makes sense. You've kind of done everything you could do. You're absolutely been at the top of your game. You're never going to be in his case, a programme that's more successful than Friends. You can't possibly earn any more money than you already have. And you sort of end up a bit rudderless. And it's a quirk, because you think, well, hang on, I've got all this stuff, but I'm still rudderless. It's a position that I suppose only those... Was it Robbie Williams that said everybody should be a millionaire or multi-millionaire for a day? And give it a go. Well, we'd all like to give it a go. I kind of know what he means. So I think there's maybe a bit of that. And he seemed to be a rather lonely, quite sad character where, you know, despite the fame and the riches, it never addressed what was probably an underlying issue going on. So, and of course, he didn't deserve to die. And yes, you take drugs, you take the risks, we all get that. But if somebody is supplying you and perhaps tacitly encouraging you and then selling you iffy gear as well that might be, you know, in somehow compromised, then that, you know, that's, I think, an area where you have to say this is, you know, I think we can all conclude a very, very sad story. But people will go to jail for decades over this, 4 of them due to be sentenced.